Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
But you can hear me okay, correct?
I can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to officially call this hearing to order, and without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I'd like to begin by noting some important requirements. Let me begin by saying that the standing and House committee rules and practices will continue to apply even during this hybrid proceeding. All members are reminded that they are expected to adhere to these standing rules, including decorum. House regulations require members to be visible through a video connection throughout the proceeding. So please, if you are on a video connection, keep your cameras on. Also, please remember to remain muted until you are recognized to minimize background noise. In the event that a member encounters technical issues that prevent them from being recognized for their questioning, I will then move to the next available member of the same party and will recognize that member at the next appropriate time slot, provided that they have returned back to the hearing. I want to again thank all of our witnesses who are here today. I appreciate your time and your effort to get here, and I have a few comments. Throughout our history, small businesses, especially those owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, have faced real challenges when it comes to participating on equal footing in the American economy and specifically in the federal procurement space. Disadvantaged businesses often navigate obstacles like discriminatory lending practices and fewer mentorship and business opportunities as they seek to grow their businesses and, of course, to serve their customers. Recognizing the struggles that disadvantaged businesses face, Congress created the Small Business and Capital Ownership Development Program known as 8A. That was done in 1978. I take particular pride in the landmark program because my initial predecessor, Perrin J. Mitchell, was the author of that, and we are reminded of him by his picture, which hangs down at the far end of this hearing room. The 8A program is, as we all know, a 9-year program that offers small businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals training, technical assistance, and contracting opportunities. 8A participants are eligible, as we also know, for 7J training, which offers valuable counseling and training opportunities in financing, management, accounting, bookkeeping, marketing, and identifying new business opportunities. The federal government has also established a statutory goal of 5% of all eligible contracting and subcontracting dollars to small and disadvantaged business concerns, including those that are not currently participants in the 8A program, where there is still more needed support. That's why I applaud President Biden's goal of increasing the share of contract awards to small and disadvantages from 5% to 15% by the year 2025. For over 40 years, socially and economically disadvantaged businesses have relied on the 8A program to help them compete and innovate in the federal marketplace. When small businesses win federal contracts, they grow, they create jobs, and they support our communities. While the 8A program helps thousands of small businesses annually, participants have reported and are still reporting ongoing challenges. For example, many business owners have reported concerns with the duration of the 8A program. And so when a small firm, as we know, is admitted, it typically takes a couple of years to receive its first award, which hinders the development of program participants and really raises the question of whether or not those enterprises are ready for graduation when they are expected to exit the program. 8A businesses have also expressed concern with the program's technical assistance and training through the 7J program. And today we will ask the question of whether the training provided to 8A participants is in fact adequately preparing small contractors for graduation, in addition to how we improve the 8A program to better support disadvantaged businesses. And lastly, we will examine how trends within the contracting space impact small 8A firms particularly. For years, the size and scope of contracts have been on the rise. That has excluded, as we know, many 8A firms that may not have the capacity to take on larger contracts. At the same time, sole source contract thresholds have remained unchanged over the years and over time, resulting in fewer 8A sole source contracts. Before this committee, the full committee, we've tackled the question of category management in the past, and it's something to keep in mind as we look at reasons as to why there's not been growth in this sole source area. Consolidation in procurement has limited the ability of 8A firms to compete for contract, ensuring that a level playing field for small contractors is one of the utmost important to our economy. So I hope that today's hearing will allow us to explore actions our committee can take to improve legislatively and to modernize the 8A program, a program that all of us support and many of us are still concerned with as it relates to the challenges that many of you as small business owners and many others who are viewing this hearing still find yourself confronted with. With that said, I'd like to yield to the distinguished ranking member, the gentlewoman from Florida, for her opening statement. Ms. Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wonderful to be here for the first time in person, right next to each other. So, and thank to all the witnesses. And as you said, contracting with the federal government is the American dream. And today's hearing is a perfect example of the work this committee must perform on behalf of America's small business contractors. We owe it to them. Congress is at its best when we are making laws that protect the interest of all small businesses. And let me repeat that, we must help all small businesses. Congress made a point to give special recognition to socially and economically disadvantaged entrepreneurs through the Small Business Act, as you mentioned, the Minority Small Business and Capital Ownership Development Program, also known as the 8A program. This program creates a space for entrepreneurs to grow, to compete, and to be productive contributors to our nation's workforce. The law mandates that 5% of the federal government spending on goods and services must go towards small, disadvantaged businesses. But according to the SBA, this goal was exceeded in fiscal year 2021 at approximately 10% or close to $60 billion. That's what the SBA is saying. But I have doubts about these numbers. And also, we cannot ignore issues that continue to plague the 8A program. For instance, unfortunately, we are seeing that fewer small businesses are winning bigger and bigger awards, and that is a very big problem. Let me translate this for you. This means less diversity, less competition, more costs for our taxpayers, and more importantly, less money in the pockets of small business owners. We have to increase participation within all of SBA's contracting programs and enhance diversity of awards so that all small businesses can succeed and not just a few, the selected ones that know how to work the system. And the SBA's role is ensuring the success of its 8A participants is key. The SBA has the responsibility to make this program work. Recently, and unfortunately, I need to report that the Inspector General found that the SBA is failing to accurately measure the effectiveness of this program. So that means that we're allocating money, but we don't know if that money that's being allocated is effective, is doing what it needs to do. It's effectively going to enhance and to help those small business owners. The program is as effective as its ability to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. So the agency must aggressively tackle potential fraud and abuse within all of its programs. Every dollar going to the wrong firm is an American taxpayer dollar that is wasted and abused. So, what do we need to do? We need to ensure that the SBA is operating the program at optimal levels, that no level of fraud or abuse is acceptable, that the federal government awards the widest range of contracts to as many small firms as possible. That is the American way, and that is why I am here to, and you, all of us, to ensure that this occurs. I thank you. I yield back. Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member yields back. Thank you very much for your statement. I'd like to take an additional moment to explain how we will proceed with the hearing today. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure, if you are with us through the hybrid setup, that your microphone is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when you are finished. I'd like to introduce our witnesses, beginning with Mr. Darrell K. Harrison. Mr. Harrison serves as a small business advisor. He has assisted small businesses for more than 35 years as a dedicated employee of the Small Business Administration, where he has held senior-level positions, including Actor Administrator of the SBA and Deputy Associate Administrator for the Office of Government Contracting and Business Development. Mr. Harrison, again, thank you very much for being with us. Our next witness is Ms. Jackie Robinson Burnett, the CEO of Senior Executive Strategic Solutions, a consulting firm, and she is also a former federal senior executive, having served in multiple positions, most recently in the SBA as the Deputy Associate Administrator of the Office of Government Contracting and Business Development in 2016. Prior to joining the SBA, Ms. Robinson Burnett served more than 20 years in the Department of Defense, both as a contracting officer and leading small business programs. Ms. Robinson Burnett, thank you again and welcome. Our third witness is Mr. Ashdeep Karana, President and CEO of Avasys Technology Incorporated, located in San Antonio, Texas. Avasys Technology is an 8A and HUBZ zone certified small business that offers information technology and management consulting services. Mr. Karana founded Avasys in 1998, and that company will be graduating from the program this year. So I want to thank you, sir, for your insight in advance, because your graduation is a part of the issues that we are talking about, not yours specifically, but the amount of time and the people who are in fact graduating. I'd like to yield to the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Florida, to introduce our final witness, Ms. Salazar.
And our final witness, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And our final witness is Mrs. Shin Lee. Welcome. She's the president of Soleil, a small business technology company providing innovative and cutting-edge technical engineering and development services to the United States government. Ms. Lee's work in government contracting began in 2010 out of a need for greater career flexibility. When an opportunity arose to subcontract to a large firm, Mrs. Lee took it. Good for her. And now the company is celebrating her 12th year, and it's in the 7th year in the SBA 8A program. Under Ms. Lee's leadership, Soleil has invested heavily in technology and quality operations, successfully holding many high-level cybersecurity and technological certifications necessary to compete for difficult and complex government contracts. A testament to her success, Soleil has successfully served many government customers such as the United States Navy, the United States Army, and the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Ms. Lee, it's a pleasure having you to testify before this committee, and I look forward to the valuable insights I know you will provide today. Welcome. I yield back.
Thank you. I join with the ranking member, Ms. Lee, in saying welcome to you also. Thank you for being here. We look forward to your testimony. The chair would now recognize Mr. Harrison, if you are prepared, and if so, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Nafume, Ranking Member Salazar, and other distinguished members of this committee. I am pleased to present testimony in support of your examination of how the SBA's 8A Business Development Program currently works, the resources it provides, and to identify ways to modernize and improve the program's effectiveness. As noted, Congress enacted Public Law 95-507 in 1978 to provide statutory authority to an existing program that was previously created by executive order for socially or economically disadvantaged individuals. The law shifted the program's focus to business development and required program participants to be at least 51% owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Since 1978, there have been several additional amendments to the law aimed at achieving the unfulfilled goals of Public Law 95-507 by addressing abuses and improving its effectiveness. Additionally, the SBA's Office of the Inspector General and the General Accounting Office have also noted instances of fraud and the lack of quality and consistent SBA monitoring and oversight. Based on my experience, I believe the following recommendations for 8A Business Development Program improvements will have a significant impact on the program's administration and effectiveness. First, while the Associate Administrator for 8A Business Development is responsible for the oversight of all matters related to the 8A Business Development Program, the Business Opportunity Specialists, who are defined by statute, are the primary face of the SBA to an 8A participant and are responsible for delivering the programs and services of the program to participants. They work in district offices under the supervision of district management who report to SBA's Office of Field Operations. It is my view that this overlapping organizational structure creates programmatic challenges. Without the cooperation and the leadership of the Office of Field Operations, the Associate Administrator for Business Development has little to no control over the implementation of program policies and procedures, limited input into the hiring and selection process, and no input into the performance review process. Consequently, I recommend a written agreement should be developed between the Office of the Associate Administrator for Business Development and the Associate Administrator for the Office of Field Operations, delineating the roles and responsibilities associated with the district office in the delivery of the 8A program. Additionally, the annual performance goals of the Associate Administrator for Business Development should be shared by the Associate Administrator for the Office of Field Operations and should be incorporated in his or her annual performance standards, as well as those of the district directors and the Business Opportunity Specialists. 7J resources should be allocated to the development and delivery of specific programs and curriculums for new and transitioning program participants. For new program participants, training should focus on preparing them to compete in the federal acquisition environment as small businesses and 8A program participants. Similarly, for transitioning companies, such coursework might include a focus on long-term planning and consideration for market expansion and diversification. Such training for new firms in their beginning stage may help alleviate the lag that many experience in receiving their first contract opportunity. Public Law 100-656 amended Section 7A of the Small Business Act to include an 8A loan program. Specifically, the administration was empowered to make loans either directly or in cooperation with banks and other financial institutions. I have no recollection that it was ever implemented. The implementation of this program will provide a source of critical financing for 8A program participants. Under Section 8A-12 of the Act, participants are required to annually prepare and submit to the SBA a capability statement. Those statements are to be disseminated to executive agencies and used during their annual contract forecasting to identify suitable contracts to support the 8A program. I am not aware of adherence to this requirement. Adherence to this requirement would greatly improve the likelihood of a new 8A program participant receiving contract assistance earlier in its 8A program participation. And finally, there should be a focus on preparing transitional stage firms to become mentors. The Mentor Protege program is an excellent opportunity for transitional 8A participants to continue their growth and development. To ensure the effectiveness of this program and validate that its objectives are being met, SBA must improve its oversight to be certain that both mentors and proteges are adhering to the Mentor Protege Agreement and that program regulations are being followed. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in connection with this committee's hearing on SBA's 8A program. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Burnett Robinson, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. And if I can ever get your first name in front of your second name and do this correctly before the hearing is over, I would have made a major accomplishment. Ms. Robinson Burnett, go right ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Nfume and Ranking Member Salazar and other distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for all that you do for citizens like me, giving us a voice and a chance to be heard. I am humbled and honored to be here before you. My husband, this handsome man sitting behind me, is a retired Army officer. We have 2 daughters serving as Army officers, and one just signed her Army Cadet Command contract last week. We are a family committed to serving this nation.
Good.
The 8A program expands our ability to easily tap into all the smart people in different corners of our country to help tackle the nation's most pressing challenges as we engage in humanitarian efforts or defend our great country within our borders and across the globe. In the simplest terms, the 8A program offers a small disadvantaged business a chance to learn how to win a federal government contract or subcontract, perform the work with their own money or an SBA loan, and if the work is deemed acceptable and timely, then expect payment. When I arrived at the SBA in December 2014, I found the pool of firms shrinking. As an inclusive leader, I brought my team around the table and asked for solutions. I wish I could say the excitement and the shift in operations that later led the team to win the highest ranking award at the SBA was due to how smart I was. But it turns out if you bring smart people around the table and support them, you have a win. I would like to share my thoughts today. Unfortunately, a considerable amount of 8A firms graduate and they struggle to stay in business 5 years after graduation. I recommend giving 8A graduate mentors priority with the Mentor Protege program. Application process. It's a low-cost and effective way to help them quickly transfer their knowledge to a new 8A. It would increase the competitiveness of a protege and build longevity for the graduate. For months, the Office of Federal Procurement Policy and GSA and contracting executives from multiple federal agencies met to create and implement category management. However, there were no small business executives at the table with an equivalent seat. The SBA had a seat but no voice, and SBA regulations lagged behind for years without inclusion in the federal acquisition regulation, like the similarly situated rule. I would suggest that Congress require OFPP's FAR Council to consider its regulations in tandem with the SBA's rulemaking. I also recommend a full-time senior executive at the Office of OFPP who understands contracting and values the contributions of small businesses. They would have a seat at the table where the discussion is category management, priorities for updates to the FAR, or the next acquisition reform. I ran into a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, West Point graduate, and he said he has tried unsuccessfully since 2016 to get 8A certification. He was a Special Forces officer. He trained Army and Foreign Services. He won a 5-year contract with the Special Operations Command. He shared with me his letter of rejection. One, his board of directors meeting minutes where he elected himself as president, treasurer, and secretary had errors in it. The other, he had 93% of his revenues from Special Operations Command. These issues are irrelevant to eligibility. I'm not advocating for dismissing eligibility rules, but there must be a shift in the SBA culture to ensure that accessible firms that the program is accessible for eligible firms. I also recommend the SBA develop justification to significantly increase their 7J budget. And I know that Congress historically provides the funds based on it, and I would ask you to support the increase. The 8A program typically has vacant positions for the 8A BOS and the business development specialist. I know that the SBA is considering virtual support, and I would recommend that the SBA also bring on a HR professional from another agency under detail to help assist objectively look at the allocations. I also think the 8A sole source threshold should be raised from $8 million for services and $10 million for manufacturing. I understand the simplified acquisition threshold is not within your jurisdiction, but I would like it to be increased. I would recommend increase from $250,000 to $1 million. Finally, I know that the smart SBA employees in our federal agencies will raise the bar in support of President Biden's goal of increasing contracts to small disadvantaged businesses. His goal is bold, but it's very achievable. I urge you to take my suggestions today to further strengthen the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson Burnett, and Mr. Burnett, welcome to you also. Mr. Karana, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Chair Bafumi, Ranking Member Salazar. Chair Bafumi, Ranking Member Salazar, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Ashdeep Karana, and I'm the President and CEO of Avasys Technology, headquartered in San Antonio, Texas. Avasys provides enterprise IT support, information assurance, software development, healthcare staffing, biomedical research and support services to the federal government's clients. Established in 1998, I have grown the company from a one-man operation to currently servicing over 50 commercial and government contracts across 14 states. When I immigrated to the United States, I was in the pursuit of the higher education and had the American dream of becoming an entrepreneur. After naturalization, I started my business from my apartment with a single dial-up server connection with a server. For over a decade, I serviced several small and mid-sized businesses as a trusted chief information officer. My business was 100% commercial when I was accepted to the SBA's 8A program in 2011. Through the program, my company has been able to grow and become highly successful in the federal marketplace. I'm particularly proud of the multi-million-dollar competitive contract I was awarded to provide clinical healthcare support services to the Air Force Base Clinic to service our men and women in uniform. It is an incredible honor to provide these services, and my company wouldn't have been here today without the 8A program, tremendous support from my family, and the ever-gracious, the Almighty Lord. The past 2 years have been difficult for small businesses, and 8A firms are no exception. I was thrilled when the committee added an extra year to the 8A program, and as part of the pandemic response, this lifeline helped companies like mine save jobs and stay afloat. While the extension was incredibly impactful, the pandemic has unfortunately impacted operations not just for 1, but for 2 years. Recovery did not truly begin until the current fiscal quarter, leaving many 8A companies approaching graduation without feeling like they have had their full time in the program. For companies like mine to truly succeed, adding an additional year of extension would make all the difference. Given the increasingly complex and competitive procurement environment, I also recommend extending the 8A program to 10 years permanently. The decline in the number of 8A firms has caused concerns across the program. According to the SBA, in August 2021, there were about 4,906 program participants, and while they were in 2010, there were about roughly 7,000. I believe this is happening for a number of reasons, and I suggest the following changes to the 8A program in order to increase the number of successful participants and dollars following the small disadvantaged businesses. First, limit on the sole source awards to individually owned 8A firms and other socioeconomic set-asides are too small. I suggest the committee to increase the sole source threshold, as you did in the 116th Congress, by eliminating the option years and allowing the amount of $4.5 million and $7.5 million each year for services and manufacturing, respectively. Group-owned 8A firms have seen a huge success with the raising of their sole source threshold 5 times to $100 million without justification. Therefore, individual firms would also welcome this important change with similar 5 times increase from the current threshold amounts. Number 2, Multiple 8A procurements are being bundled and consolidated, with scope additions making their follow-on contracts too large for the individual 8A companies' current direct award threshold level. Data on these awards remains too broad. Therefore, I suggest SBA break down their annual scorecard spend into 4 subcategories. Mapping out the impact of these dollars would assist the administration in identifying contracts that could be set aside or directly awarded to individually owned 8A firms. Third, changing the business activity target requirements is necessary to the developmental stage of the program. It should start with the award of the first contract instead of right away. Additionally, 8A competitive dollars should be considered as small business competitive dollars, meaning the BAT restrictions would only apply to sole source revenue. Similarly, other program continuity ratios, including the audit requirement threshold, should be at least adjusted 2 to 3 times. I cannot express the appreciation I've had for the 8A program and how it has dramatically changed my business after a tough survival in both the 2001 and 2008 recessions. I'm sincerely thankful for the excellent support obtained from the San Antonio Small Business Administration Office and the many SBA specialists and officers who are working hard for the thousands of 8A businesses like myself. Not only does Avasys' success impact me, but it also impacts more than 200 employees I have hired around the country as a result. Thank you for holding this important hearing, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, sir. We will get to questions in just a moment, but I want to make sure that we go to Ms. Lee for her 5 minutes of testimony and to say welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Umufumei, Ranking Member Salazar, and other members of the subcommittee. I'm really thrilled to be here to testify today. My name is Chin Lee. I'm the president of Solio LLC. Solio is headquartered in the DC area in Vienna, Virginia, and we bring innovative technical solutions to our customers to help them develop and transform and modernize their IT systems and infrastructure. So originally from China, I came here and got my Master of Science degree from the George Washington University 25 years ago, and have called DC area home since then. Solio's venture into the government contracting is also out of a necessity when I was seeking treatment for my middle child who has a rare, very rare chromosome abnormality. So when the opportunity to subcontract arose, I took that risk, and that's how Solio started in government contracting. And 12 years later today, we very proudly support DISA, a number of DoD agencies, including DISA, Army, Navy, and DCSA. And that success is really a testimony to our commitment and investment in innovation and technology, as well as the contributions from our team. It's also remarkable if you think about only 9% of the women-owned business are Asian American owned, and only 6% of the science and engineering employees in the US are Asian. So it's really a remarkable and very humbling experience for me. And again, I want to really thank this committee to advance policies that would further advance the interest for this committee, especially the 8A program. So Solio started in 2010 as a second-tier subcontractor, as I mentioned earlier. And then we became a first-tier subcontractor. Gradually, we started bidding for small business prime contracts. So we received our 8A designation in June of 2015. That's 5 years after we started government contracting business. So the first 5 years were subcontractors and really building up our performance and qualifications. And the 8A program is really a game changer that provided Solio a critical, if not the only, contract to really prime and be successful. So I'm very passionate and I'm sincerely grateful for the program. Well, it has allowed me to find a successful way forward. I also just want to outline some thoughts on specific elements of the program that can be further improved. So one of the challenges, as mentioned earlier, is for the graduating and successful 8A companies to minimize the potential loss in revenue once they graduate from the program and they're no longer in 8A. So I believe greater assistance from the SBA is much needed in this transition period out of the program. For example, it would be very helpful for the SBA to consider allowing contracts performed by a graduating woman-owned or hub zone company after they graduate for that contract to be solicited as either an 8A, either a hub zone or a woman-owned instead of just an 8A contract. This way, it aligns with the SBA's overall goal, as ranking member has mentioned, to really advocate for the entire small business community, not just the 8A or hub zone or women-owned. So it's fully aligned with that if the graduating 8A is still a small business. But it also allows the graduating 8A companies to minimize the revenue loss, and that could still retain their revenue. The other thing that we could use a lot of help from the SBA is oversight of the joint venture program. It is a very powerful program, and Solio has been in that since the second year we were admitted to the 8A program. Well, there is a lot of structured paperwork and very good oversight during the initial formation of the JV. There's not as much SBA supervision in the later stage, especially in the execution stage of the JV. So there's also very limited recourse if the mentor is not fulfilling its commitment. And so giving the SBA greater power with respect to the enforcement of the JV will really help 8A companies like ours, the mentor project program, greatly. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's very much an honor, and I look forward to answering questions.
Ms. Lee, thank you very, very much, and my thanks to all of the witnesses who are with us this morning. I would like to call your attention to the fact that we've been joined by the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser, and welcome him, obviously, to this hearing as well. We've got some questions. You've all had great comments and great suggestions. One of the things that I know I can say on behalf of myself and this distinguished gentlewoman from Florida, our ranking member, is that we passionately want to make the 8A program much better. It is not something that divides us, it's something that unites us. And I think beyond this hearing, we've got to go directly to the administrator of the SBA to figure out what can be done in the time that we have. And I tell you, I speak out of a little bit of frustration. I joined this committee in 1987 when I first got elected to the Congress. Served for 10 years, chaired the subcommittee, went away for 24 years, came back, and many of the problems and the issues and the suggestions that we were listening to then have languished. They're still before us today. So it's a passion, and there's absolute unanimity between the ranking member and myself to try to find a way to get something done legislatively with every bit of strength that we have. So let me recognize myself for 5 minutes, and we will proceed with the ranking member and the order of members as they appear. Mr. Harrison, we all know the 8A program is a 9-year program divided into 2 phases, an initial 4-year development stage and a final 5-year transition stage. You've heard from some of our witnesses today with respect to changing that, restructuring it, because 9 years is not enough. Can you speak to this 9-year time frame, give us from your own experience a sense as to whether or not you believe, like many do, that it's just not enough time for a small firm to develop the skills needed to adequately compete in this economy, and by the time they do, they're out the door?
Thank you for that question. I'm sorry. Thank you for that question. I listened to those comments with interest because several years ago, we developed a proposal to redesign the 8A program along the lines that were mentioned by the witnesses. One of the things that we talked about was the fact that most firms coming into the program were truly eligible for the program had little experience in the federal marketplace and found it difficult to navigate the federal system early on, and their ability to achieve contract assistance was hampered to an extent that sometimes they were 3 or 4 years into the program before they actually realized some success in achieving that. The question around whether or not 9 years is long enough, I think the time frame is highly dependent upon how successful you are coming into the program and how well you take off with the benefits that are available to the program. My thinking along those lines is that the way the program should be a 9-year program. I think the way it's structured, though, and how that's implemented is what's important. I honestly believe that a firm should come into the program, and when they first come into the program, they should be provided targeted resources in learning how to do business in the federal environment. They should be given assistance in understanding acquisition trends, understanding how to respond to solicitations, understanding how to develop relationships and market themselves. And when I think of marketing, I don't speak of marketing generally. I speak of marketing and how that's actually done effectively in the federal system. And I think your term should actually start. You would either put a limit on it, and you would say your first year would be dedicated to receiving assistance under the 7J program targeted to developing your ability to do business in the federal government. If after that 1 year you don't receive a contract, your term may start. Or if you receive a contract during that 1 year, maybe your term starts in that 1 year. But I would look at structuring a program in phases that allow for business development to lead the way to success in the program.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harrison. Ms. Robinson-Burnett, I'd like to just turn to you quickly before yielding. As was previously mentioned, the president has a goal of increasing the share of federal contracting dollars to small and disadvantaged firms from 5 to 15% by 2025. In your experience, are there any specific steps that the SBA should be taking and that we should be holding them accountable for to ensure that the initiative results in agencies reserving more opportunities for the 8A program and not less?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. When I was a contracting officer years ago, in accordance with the Federal Acquisition Regulation and my contract training, my first step was to conduct market research for any acquisition that came across my desk to determine if the rule of 2 could be met. Can 2 or more small businesses do the work? And if so, I would set the work aside for small businesses, or I would find an indefinite delivery contract or a GWAC, one of these multiple award contracts, that would allow set aside for small businesses. With the shrinking acquisition workforce and the new increase in use of GWACs in category management, contracting officers are picking a contract vehicle first, bypassing the small business staff and saying that contract doesn't require them to set aside for small business. Even if an incumbent is the small business that would be devastated with the loss of this work, or the program was in the 8A program, they pull it out and put it into these contracts. I think the SBA must get more depth engage with the OSDBUs and the small business directors at these agencies to learn what is really happening at their level in terms of how the challenges they have with getting contracting officials to abide by the rule of 2. The OFPP memo, the White House memo M2203, Advancing Equity in Procurement, now requires OFPP and SBA and the OSDBUs to work together on category management. I think it's important that they look across the government and engage in every level. Are contracting officials abiding by the rule of 2? When small businesses can do the work, is the work going to small business? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. My time has expired. I want to yield to the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Salazar, and I want to call your attention to the fact that we've been joined by the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, who's also a member of this committee. Thank you, sir. Ms. Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with you that we have the bipartisan spirit in trying to find solutions for this program because we're all, at least I consider myself, part of the American dream. And Mrs. Lee said it specifically, and the other witnesses as well. And thank you, Mrs. Robinson Burnett, for your service, not only yours, but the handsome husband behind you and the children that are joining the Armed Forces of the United States. Very laudable. So thank you. So I think I have a question for all of you, but I'm going to start with Mrs. Lee. If there's something, in a very simple terms, if there's something that you need to fix with the 8A program that you are saying that helped you so much and it put you where you are right now, what would it be? What would you do if you have the power to fix that 8A program?
Number one, thank you for that question. Thank you. Number one would be to raise the threshold. As echoed by my fellow witnesses, the current threshold of $4 million for services is way too small. Time has moved on, contracting has moved on, everything has moved on, but that threshold stayed. And what that does is it really is an impairment to regular individual 8A companies. And Soleo, my company, had multiple times for our 8A contracts to be taken away because there's not enough threshold. Either they were given to 8A companies that can attain or support 100 million threshold, or they were being put on other contract vehicles due to the consolidation, category management, all those reasons to be put on an IDIQ contract as a task order. So that's our number one.
Number one. Okay, what about the, okay, let me give the opportunity to Mr. Karana. One thing that you would do, that you would fix with this program.
Ma'am, I would echo Ms. Lee's comments as well. The threshold is way too limiting, that it deserves the same increase as the group-owned 8As, up to at least 22 million for the individual 8A owned. This will make a significant impact on the competitiveness for the businesses as they get ready for the competitive non-8A small business awards as well. The second would be to really have the scorecard, which the SBA sets for the agencies, to recognize what really makes the bottom line difference to 99% of the companies like myself, which is identifying the trackability, as you mentioned, ma'am, earlier, of the dollars being spent on the direct awards is indeed going to the individually owned 8As. And what the recent trend, contrary, has been, unfortunately, that threshold has shifted predominantly to the group-owned 8As in the recent years because of their high threshold value.
All right, Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you for that question. Some federal agencies had started decreasing their contracts going to the 8A program because the pool was shrinking, and they didn't want their contracts tied into the 8A program and not have enough firms to perform the work. I would make sure that the SBA shift their focus to include every firm that is eligible. The SBA can provide statistics on their applications, but when I was at the SBA, I thought the issue with the declining pool was we weren't receiving enough applications. Then I found we were receiving 2,300 applications a year and certifying 300.
You said something about shifting the SBA's culture.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Right now, the focus is making sure they mitigate the risk of firms getting into the program that shouldn't be in the program, focusing on the fraud. And really, that's the 1 or 2% of firms that apply. And so the other 90+% of firms are struggling to get in, like this lieutenant colonel that I talked about, because the SBA is focused on the wrong thing.
All right,
Yeah.
and I would like to hear your opinion. We have a problem where the SBA is allocating those funds, but there's not tracking if those funds are being successful. Meaning, if I'm going to, if like in a university, we're paying for the tuition, but we do not know if the student is getting good grades, if it's attending school classes, or if it's graduating. So the money is not being, I believe that is just, no, we do not know if being well used. So do you feel the same way? Do you think that's your impression? Mrs. Lee.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And one of the questions we always ask is, how do you measure a program success? Is it by how many new 8A companies that are being admitted, or how many 8A contracting dollars that went into individual firms like ours? Or is it by how many are graduating and how many are still in business 5 years after graduation?
Which one do you think should be the right answer?
I think it should be, number one, the dollars that actually go to individual 8A firms, and number two, are they still in business 5 years after graduation?
What do you say, Mr. Karana?
I would echo exactly the same, ma'am.
Mrs. Robinson?
Yes, the number of dollars
So
going.
those should be the guidelines.
The number of dollars going to eligible to firms, and not just the super 8As, but the individually owned small businesses, the number of firms, and then how many firms graduate and can stay in business after 5 years. I would also like to add how many firms graduate and can actually sell their company to a new 8A that comes in. It's important that we reduce the burdens on that. A woman-owned can sell to another woman-owned, and their contracts stay. A veteran to a veteran. If an 8A sells to another 8A, a graduate 8A sells to a new 8A and transitions, those contracts are slated to be terminated, and that's unique only to the 8A program.
Mr. Hairston, I'm going to give you the last word. I think he's muted.
Mr. Harrison, we cannot hear you.
I apologize. I agree that you, with the issues around measuring success, but I think you also have to consider the motivation of the entrepreneur coming in and what constitutes success to that entrepreneur. I think measuring based on dollars received is a fair measure, but we can't forget that this is a business development program. And it's basically survived based on the notion that it's a business development program. So anything measuring success also has to be attributed to the business development assistance that's been provided to the firm. I agree that.
I'm going to ask you to begin to conclude.
Okay, but I would agree with the comments of the other panelists.
Thank you very much.
Yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member as well. Thank you to all of you. Very important subject. I can see it in your eyes. You're living this, and it's very essential to your business livelihood. So the questioning that's taking place here is specific, and boy, that's what we need to do. And as the chairman stated earlier, that he's been dealing with such bureaucracy and less than business efficiencies in these requirements for many years, and I'm hearing all that. So my first question would be to Ms. Robinson Burnett, and I think I already know the answer, but do you have a white paper outlining some strong suggestions of what would be in the interests of the contracting that we could have and we could work on to actually try to implement? Do you have such a plan already written?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. I don't have a white paper, but my written testimony is 15 pages long that goes in depth about the recommendations that I've offered today.
Beautiful. I summarized it. I'm sorry I didn't read the whole thing, but that will suffice. Okay, so next, the administrative burdens of the government places on small businesses that where everybody's agreeing we want to reduce. The fraud end of it, you said that's 1% to 2%, and I agree with that. I think a little bit of a phone call and a little bit of data analysis in today's information age shouldn't be all that difficult to determine whether it's a real company or a phony baloney company. Now, on the same note, we just came off of IDLE, and we had some really rush initiatives, which you're very familiar with, that did have some significant fraud in them. So it's got to be a concern. Quickly, Ms. Lee, let me go to you if you would. What can be eliminated from that so as we can have integrity and efficiency?
Thank you. From my own experience, the individual 8A program seems to be administered better than the 8A mentor protege joint venture program. Solio has been in that JV program for 6 years now. There's a lot of opportunity for the SBA to really exert oversight and improve its oversight to stop the abuse from the mentors to its small business proteges. That's where my personal experience has been focused on.
So you all must be aware of some companies, and you've experienced in yourself, that engage in the contracting for your eligibility, for the contract itself, and just run into barriers that are don't make a lot of sense to you, but you need to overcome anyway because it's a very important contract. Does this happen? Does that happen regularly? And do you know other companies that just give up because it seems too burdensome?
Yes, I do.
So-
And I think.
Go ahead.
everyone-
Mr.
Yes.
Karana, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, sir. So absolutely. Through the 9-year journey, the first 3 years, I almost gave up hope. This is after surviving 2 recessions, surviving in commercial for 14 years, and still facing the challenges of the first. I mean, I thought 80 would be to the rescue, but of course, in the 3rd year, I got blessed with the first U.S. Air Force contract. Then I started to foresee a few other challenges, which are the roadblocks, which are clearly distinguishing on why they're there. So what I started to notice is the consolidation efforts, bundling efforts, scope creeps on the existing requirements, just to make them above the direct award threshold by the agencies so that they could make it competitive or be awarded to the Super 8As. And that was a big loss of the development dollars, which are much essentially needed for the development firms like myself. Another common one seen is the category management. And once we are graduating, those 8A requirements are being removed from the 8A to small business or some other category, which I believe strengthening the PCRs at the SBA, which are procurement representatives, they are our safeguards, protecting the program and the requirements within the 8A program. They need to be empowered, should have the influence to the agencies and the additional scorecard mechanisms. And I've highlighted a few in my 10-page testimony.
Lastly, and I have very limited time, do you find that ineligible companies are gaming the system and gaining the contracts more in an unfair manner?
Sir, within the 8A program, I believe that's very well vetted, at least the 8A part. The other socioeconomic, I'm not too privy about, but there may be some. Yeah.
Okay, and is payment, are there any reasons that that businesses don't apply because the payment's not there, the requirements are too costly? And I know I'm over my time, Chairman, but a quick answer to that is that, do some small businesses not apply because it's simply not worth it? Please, Ms. Robinson-Burnett.
As I said, over 2,300 firms apply every year. They're applying. Only 300 are being brought in. Firms are paying advisors $4,000 to $10,000 to do applications for them. So they're interested. It's just very difficult to get through the cumbersome process at the SBA, not relative to eligibility, but mistakes or in the application that has nothing to do with are they eligible.
See, well, we'll certainly work on this, and thank you, and thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, for being over.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My colleague on this committee, Mr. Evans, and I introduced H.R. 5861, which is the Waiver Authorization Streamline Act. It seeks to reduce the regulatory burden on the 8A transferring its contract to another 8A company. So I know that was kind of discussed here. And after acquisitions or simply just being gobbled up by the other company. Instead of going through the multi-level review process, which could span months, as was brought up earlier again. SBA administrator being the authority to waive the approval process so long as the 8A company is absorbing the contract can perform the work. So I'm going to ask Ms. Robinson-Burnett. So before serving as the CEO of the consulting firm, you served as senior exec to the SBA Office of Government Contracting. So I appreciate your experience. Based on your experience, do you believe streamlining the approval process for transferring the 8A contract after acquisition would help keep more small businesses in the program?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. The SBA administrator on a non-delegable authority is the approving authority for transferring the 8A contracts when an 8A firm, 8A graduate is acquired. And I believe that that authority should remain at that level, but the contract should not be automatically slated for termination without that. I believe that giving only time those contracts should be terminated is if the company is going to a non-8A. Or if with the consolidation of the company that acquires it, that company now becomes other than a small business. Because once you join those two companies, they could now exceed the size standards.
Right.
But if they are still small, what a great way for a new 8A to start out with contracts, customers, and possibly the mentorship of the firm that released the company.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overgeneralize, but sometimes those mergers are either because there's a stress on one of the two, financially, or in some instances, I mean, it makes sense because both entities kind of say, you know, we're competitors now, we should kind of unite on and be more competitive in the market, right?
Yes. Also, after a 9-year term, sometimes one real example I had, and it was the first time I encountered this, I was actually the associate administrator of the 8A program. An 8A participant died.
Oh.
And now his contracts had to go to another company, and that would, if the company was sold to another 8A, then of course his family that helped him build this company could benefit, but then transition the company and the employees to a new 8A, so the company could continue to go. And instead of the company having to shut down, employees lose their jobs, and all the contracts be terminated.
Right.
So it could be because of illness, a desire to retire after 20 years in the business, or the company just wants to sell for other reasons.
Gotcha. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Just real quick, Ms. Lee, the other thing, Wisconsin, my home state, our big three are tourism and agriculture and manufacturing, and for the most part, light manufacturing. So you've got kind of these smaller factories, and then you've got the transportation component, and then you might have a tool and die shop down the road, and so they're all integrated. So in my experience, not only personal experience because of interacting with some of the small businesses and father-in-law that was in manufacturing for years, but oftentimes, I mean, they would tell the story that, you know, the federal contracts would come, they would land on the desk, and they would put their best person on it, but by the time they got done bidding it and going through kind of what the standards and specs are, it just wasn't worth their time. So they would, you know, they eventually would just give up on any of those types of contracts. So the reason I bring it up is because I think there's a misnomer that, oh my gosh, we can't wait to get government contracts because it's just the best thing in the world. And that's not always the case, I think, especially for medium to small business people. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that and what your experience on that front is.
I would agree, especially if you think about it. A lot of the acquisitions, even though it's a $4 million direct award or a small business set aside, they require a huge amount of certification, especially with the cyber risk and the supply chain risk for the DoD community that we support. It is a legitimate requirement, but to what extent for a small business that you need to require the same level of certification as those billion-dollar companies that have resources to go through, you know, years of certification and invest in hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire those. So that is a legitimate concern, and I share that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair is happy to recognize and to welcome Mr. Stauber, the gentleman from Minnesota who has joined us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You know, while we can all agree that increasing contracting goals of the federal government, especially of the disadvantaged small businesses, it is a laudable goal, I think we need our agencies to be more transparent. It seems to me that agencies are picking a few of their favorite small businesses, dumping all their money into those very select few, and then reporting that they are far exceeding their contracting goals year after year. So without competition, we are guaranteed to see an increase in prices for taxpayers in the long run. Ms. Lee, can you explain how contract consolidation practices has harmed more competition amongst 8A businesses?
Thank you. I'd be very happy to. As mentioned by my fellow witnesses earlier, this category management.
Ms. Lee, would you speak into the microphone?
Oh,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Be happy to, and that's what we live with as individual 8A companies on a daily basis. Because there's the group 8As that have now a threshold of $100 million. So even when there's an 8A opportunity that's being solicited or directly awarded, and Solio was on the receiving side of that multiple times, the question for a contracting officer is very realistically, if you have a requirement that's $4 million a year, but a 5-year requirement, totaling $20 million or above. So what do? Would you give to an individual 8A companies that you need to then subsequently, if you're even allowed, to reissue that same contract 5 times or 4 more times? Or would you give it to another 8A company, group 8A company that has a much higher threshold? So it's really a challenge, and one of the contracts that Solio performed, we lost that because of the real consideration, very practical considerations. It went to a group-owned 8A company, but I can't say the performance was up to the level, so it was subsequently recompeted. So to your question, I really think one of the ways to address that is to raise the threshold so there's more a level playing field among 8A companies and also extending that to all small business. You have HubZone, women-owned, veteran-owned, SDVOSB. So that would really help the small business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was my only question, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to ask a question today. Let me ask a question very basically. When we talk about 8A contractors, we know that the issues that impacted those contractors during COVID have been somewhat adjusted by advancing an additional year. But we know that many of those contractors suffered beyond that one calendar year. What are your thoughts on some additional time and or assistance that can be given to those people that were graduating out of the 8A program but lost significant time because of the pandemic?
Thank you for the questions, sir. As a graduating 8A, the last year, or the recent edition has made a decent impact, but it's not yet just enough. I'll give an example. The last year, in our own follow-on contract from the United States Air Force for the clinical healthcare services, came up for recompetition, and that was only possible because of the 1-year extension given. However, there are many other large government vehicles which are delayed through the pandemic response in getting re-procured, and I feel that I've lost that. I'll be losing that once in an 8A lifetime chance to bid on them. So I humbly request another years of extension, which will make a real big difference to many graduating 8As like myself.
Any others want to weigh in on that?
Thank you, Congressman. I think an additional year would significantly benefit the 8As that are in the program right now. Also, I think it's incumbent on the SBA to really push the Mentor Protege program, which allows a graduating 8A to joint venture with a new 8A and transition the contracts and continue to perform on 60% of the work. And this is a real legitimate way that an 8A that is graduating can maintain their work and their customer base.
How much of that actually happens? I mean, I hear about the Mentor Protege program. I hear varying views on some that work, some that don't work as well. What has been your general experience on the availability of willing mentors?
Thank you for that question. I think the SBA's Mentor Protege program is one of the most successful programs that has come out of the SBA. The director of that program is Mr. Stanley Jones, Jr., I think one of the smartest leaders at the SBA. it is working exceptionally well. And the SBA has a mentor protege program conference every year. They had one before COVID-19. And this is a great place to do matchmaking between graduated 8As and new 8As and allow them to meet and connect at that event.
Can somebody speak to the reverse of that, finding a protege? How successful has that been, and are there seamless opportunities to create that linkage?
So actually, I'd like to add, there are elements which can be implemented to come in line with the mentor-protege intention and the success which can be achieved through it. First, the sole source threshold, if it comes close to the 4 or 5 times the capacity it is, it'll help directly give the empowerment to the prime contractor or the 8A contractor to compete for the real world competitive awards, which are generally on an average of $20 to $25 million. Number 2, the SBA lending program could be empowered with working with the banks to provide the line of credit, which is much needed on the financial support rather than reliance on just the mentors. Number 3, empowering SBA with the additional PCRs or the supports, they can then further help us in providing the contract, legal, HR, negotiation support, which is much needed. That these are all elements which a mentor would typically provide to the proteges, and SBA has been instrumental in giving many of those. More could be done. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as that close, I'd like to, unless there was somebody else that wanted to weigh in, I'm sorry, did I hear someone jump in?
None of the witnesses, unless it's Mr. Harrison, who's not here.
Okay, in that case, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, first of all, thank you and thank all of our witnesses. Mr. Chairman, ask that at a later date if we can revisit the possibility of visiting with SBA to see what the likelihood and ability for us to advance the discussion to consider an additional year of resources for those 8As who were undoubtedly significantly harmed by the pandemic.
Thank you very much. It's so noted, and I appreciate your comments. One of the things we really, I think, are committed to doing in this committee is to find a way to start being able to mark some progress so that 5 years from now, this is still not the discussion. And I want to take a moment just to thank again all of our witnesses, Mr. Harrison, Ms. Lee, Mr. Karana, and Ms. Robinson-Burnett. I have to say I'm a little troubled to hear, though, that I was not aware of this, and maybe it's my own fault, that if you are an 8A contractor and you die or you retire after 20, 25 years or something else happens and your business is sold to me, that all of the contracts that are in place are considered null and void. I mean, that really, really disturbs me. Particularly, I think, as you said, Ms. Robinson-Burnett, that's not the case with any other category of business. So there are a lot of good ideas and suggestions from all of you that I hope we will find our way to make into legislation. The ranking member and I, as I've said before, are committed to real change and change that's verifiable so that we're able to mark progress. But again, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Ms. Salazar. She was kidding earlier, but she wasn't really kidding. This is the first time we've sat together on a committee because we've been in a hybrid virtual situation. But here we are, the A-team. My thanks to all of you, and this hearing now stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.